Why do you want to go back to Camp Deering?
Because we need to tell the world about your experiences there.
Because that's the horror stage. I agree with you. It is a horror story.
Making Montauk Chronicles, I've learned most lessons, more than anything I've ever worked on, because it was such a long period of time, and the movie itself has evolved through so many different stages. It's been a while since I started it, and I was working on several other projects, so it's not like I was working on it consistently. I didn't start working on it consistently until about 4 years ago. That's when I felt free enough to really start exploring it and shooting more, and it just never really felt right to me. And I just kept working on it, and I actually started screening it and letting people see different versions of it. And I was never 100% happy with it. That's why I kept working on it. I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I wasn't happy with what I was achieving with it as a story. And I still didn't get to the core of what this thing was. It's such a difficult topic to explore.
Your mind can be modeled as a sphere with cones, 7 cones opening to the surface of the sphere, joined at the tips, with the 8th cone going from the tips out to the non-physical consciousness, the parallel minds in the parallel worlds.
There are infinite realities, and every possibility happens. There are realities where the Illuminati are sabotaged and stopped. There are realities where they are successful, and everything in between.
The concept of the Montauk Legends was around since the 90s, when a book was published, Montauk Experiments in Time. I'm from Long Island, New York. And I grew up in Montauk, swimming in the ocean out there and hanging out on the beach as a kid, and I didn't know anything about the legends until later on, until the book was presented to me. It started back then. That's when I was first aware of it, and then later on the concept was presented to me again, and in '06 I had a concept that I wanted to roll with and see where it went. It was a basic concept. I wanted to interview the 3 men, living men, who claimed that this thing happened.
They wanted mind control into the mass population. Still, the TV setting is the best way to do that. Influence the masses.
Beings who were from other worlds, other galaxies, even interdimensional.
Oh, there was the little grays about that tall. Then they had the big hook-nosed grays.
There were many who looked just like human beings. You would not know the difference between them or anyone else, yet they were not from this world.
We actually had a young fellow who could literally dissolve and walk through a wall. I've seen him do it.
The stories are so off the wall and lacking in evidence, any hard evidence, that you're really just going on the testimonies of these 3 men. That's not enough for me. I need more. I need to find out why do so many people believe this, because there are people that believe this story all over the world. And so I started to find that concept to be interesting. Not to debunk it, that's not the idea here. It's to try and understand the nature of the story first and why so many people believe it without hard evidence. In the end, it wasn't about finding hard evidence, because honestly, with something like this, there's really none to be found. It doesn't exist. So what I was looking for was credible witness. I was trying to break down the subject matter in sections and look to see throughout history where else something similar may have happened. Everything from displays of psychic abilities to any government around the world throughout history that have taken people against their will and used them for any kind of experiment. So these things have occurred, and we have proof that they occurred. What I'm saying is that the idea of mind control and the idea of acknowledging that there's another dimension or other dimensions, other planes of existence, or life, the probability of intelligent life in other galaxies, it's all very believable and very plausible if you do your research. What I ultimately wanted to do with this thing was to really make something worthwhile and have something to say about, the fascination with conspiracy theories, the fascination with distrust of the governments of the world, to the point where you actually believe that, there are reptiles inside human skin ruling the universe.
The reptilian races from the Draco star system colonized this planet eons ago before there were any humans here. And it was only many millennia after the colonization by the reptilians that human beings also colonized this planet from elsewhere. And there were many wars that went on back and forth for many thousands of years. And after a bit of time, they started to use mind control and programming and hybridization in order to work their way back into the surface and take control of humanity.
They, convince the governments to do what they want by saying, we'll give you great technologies, which they have. The technology of that camera right there is from the aliens, no question.
I tried to get deep into it, go to the source of the stories and display for people what I learned along the way. So a lot of it's about the experience of making it. That's really what the film ended up becoming, was the experience of making the film. Because I think I had to go through it to find out what this movie was about. I had to live through it and experience it and allow it to affect me to find out what this story is. I went through a lot to make this, so it's in the movie, My perspective is in the movie. I really lived through this. I really went to go speak to these people. I stayed in their homes. I spent time with them. And this was a number of years. The subject matter really affected me. And so now I'm giving that to you the best way I possibly can. Ultimately, this is a documentary, but I wanted to integrate cinema into the documentary. I wanted to have scenes of just pure cinema, if possible, if it worked. The way I interpreted the stories, the way they are in the film cinematically, they're horror stories to me. Kids getting kidnapped and beaten and murdered, and aliens experimenting on kids, kids being buried alive and drowned. this isn't E.T., this isn't Star Trek, this is a horror movie. This is a horror story to me. If it was real, it's even worse. And I think for a lot of people, they read about the stories, but for some reason it doesn't translate into the horror that it should be. And so I wanted to put that in the picture as well. Some people that are into this story seem like they really want this thing to be true. I don't. I'd like to live in a world where this shit isn't possible, but I think worse things have happened that we have evidence of. I think we need to take a look at history and see how humans have treated other humans that we know of, that we have evidence of, and start there.
Junior most likely was a apparition picked out of Duncan Cameron's mind and brought as close to reality as it could. It appears as a Sasquatch.
Was it that when it was there? I mean,
It sure looked like a Sasquatch to me.
Again, I'm still puzzled as to why it's so easy for people to believe in all of this, because you can't be selective with something like this. The same men who say that the mind control stuff happened also say that Junior was created. It's a lot to take in, and I think it's smart to really just kind of step back from it and take your time with something like this and not just declare that it happened. You don't know that it happened, and you don't know, you can't say it didn't happen either, which leaves me with a lot of frustration. Is it possible that a good deal of the alien stuff or the interdimensional travel and all that stuff was a hallucination inspired by heavy amounts of drugs being given to the subjects? I believe that's possible too.
Quite honestly, I've talked about this for many, many years. So, in a lot of ways, talking about it, writing about it, has been a sort of a therapy, a release. I don't really feel emotional about it anymore.
My ultimate message with Montauk Chronicles is, even if you don't believe in the Montauk legends as we know them, all of the elements that make up the story, if you do your research, become very believable.
This is a wild story. If you want to believe it, you read it as fact. If you don't believe it, read it as science fiction. It's up to you. Whether you're going to believe it or you don't believe it, doesn't make any difference to me.
Look, because if any of this is true, we're really in deep shit. End of story. We're in serious trouble if this is true.